What's going on, everybody? My name is TAETRO, and today I want to walk you through my latest live performance with the Akai MPK Mini in Ableton Live. Let's check it out. Alright, first things first, if you enjoy live electronic music performances, tutorials, and free sound packs, click that subscribe button down below. Basically, I want to be your electronic music mentor. I want to help you understand how to create live electronic music performances just like I do on this channel. But for now, if you haven't watched the Akai MPK Mini performance, I'm going to link it in the description down below. Pause this video, open a new tab, and watch it, and then come back so you can see how I made it. Alright, let's get into the tutorial. First thing you should know is the tech that I used to create this performance. I'm using a MacBook Pro, an early 2015 MacBook Pro with 8GB of RAM and an i5 processor. My DAW is Ableton Live. I'm using the Suite version, which is the full version of Ableton Live. From the computer, I'm running a simple aux cable to the Tascam recorder, which is recording the whole session, and then I'm monitoring directly out of the Tascam recorder with some Bose headphones. The only controller or piece of musical equipment I'm using is the Akai MPK Mini in this session. And I'm going to talk about how I custom mapped the Akai MPK Mini to run the whole session, but we're going to get to that in a bit. First, let's talk about the sounds. Alright, so if you've watched any of my live electronic music performances in the past, you know that I usually like to start with some type of timekeeping loop. That ensures that I don't really need to use a metronome at the beginning of a session. So for that, I'm just using this simple percussion loop. And aside from that, the only other pre-recorded loop in the session are the drums that come in at the end. A cool 16-bar loop that just gives me a nice epic ending. For the sounds that I played live, I have two operator synths. One of those is my lead synth. It sounds like this. Of course, I've got a ton of reverb on it. And then my bass is also an operator synth. With an arpeggiator. I'm using two sounds from the Little People soundtrack. I've done a whole video overviewing this sound pack because it is my favorite and it's free. So I'll link that video in the description below, as well as a link to download the sound pack. One of the sounds I used from that sound pack was my first drum kit in the session. And the other sound I used from that kit was this voice pad sound. Again, with tons of reverb. The first synth you hear in the session is one of Ableton Live's new wavetable synths. One other sound I used was from a free pack called Retro Synths, and I got that from the Ableton website. And then I have just one other drum rack with a couple of random samples. With tons of reverb. Now let's get into how I mapped the session. So if I open up Ableton's Midi Mapping screen, we can take a look at all my custom mappings for the session. So I'll start with the knobs. I usually have on my master channel for all my live sessions some type of effects. Usually it's a beat repeat or some type of filtering. And that's what I have here. So you can see that these three knobs right here adjust my beat repeat, and these are each at different rates. Basically what these macro knobs are doing are turning on and off that particular beat repeat. You can see that the macro is mapped to this repeat button right here. So there's an instance of beat repeat here in this rack for each division of time. So now let's jump up a row. Let me play a clip so you can hear what they do. This first knob is a low cut filter. The next knob is a high cut. And the next knob is a reverb breaker. This effect rack is actually from Sample Magic, and it came free with a sound pack. Now, this knob right here is actually a filter for the timekeeping loop that I talked about earlier. You can see it adjusting the high cut there. And this last knob right here is actually a volume knob for the final drums in the track. So the drums are actually playing through the entire session, even from the beginning. And since I don't have any clip launching capabilities on the Akai MPK Mini, I have to keep it running and I have to bring it in somehow. So I have it on, but the volume all the way down. So once we get to the end of the track, I can just fade it in. Now let's talk about mapping the pads. Now when I talk about mapping the pads, I'm talking about mapping them in CC mode. This basically allows me to jump away from the drum rack control, so actually being able to physically play drums, to being able to control different things in live, like turning the drums on and off, which is what pad 1 does in this session. So here are the drums from the session, and then if I want to cut them out for a section, all I do is press pad 1, and that turns off each of those. So what that basically means in the MIDI mapping mode is that each one of the track on and off buttons are mapped to pad 1. And you can see that they're each mapped to the same button. The other pad mapping I made was for the session record button. You can see that right up here. And the way I set up these sessions is with rows of empty clips. So each scene is a way for me to start new because it's a scene of empty clips. And that controls the loop length so that I don't have to punch in and punch out live. So for instance, once the session is started, I'm hearing the timekeeping loop. I can turn session record on. So now that I've turned session record on, you see that a couple things have turned red, which means they're live and they're recording. So I can just go ahead and play. And I don't have to start and stop recording. It's just automatically there. I do need to remember to go back into CC mode and turn that session recording off. This is a really convenient way to play loops on the fly without needing something like a launch pad or a launch key. So you might have noticed that I was reaching over to my laptop during this session, and you also might be wondering how I was arming tracks on the fly. Well, I was actually using the arrow keys on my laptop. And when you use your arrow keys normally in Ableton Live, what happens is it selects the next track. So you can scroll through your tracks, it's super simple. But I've actually set up a custom script. It's the options.txt file that comes with Ableton Live. And you can set it so that when you scroll through the tracks like this, it actually arms the tracks. This is really similar to how a launch key works, because a launch key has built-in arrows for track select, and natively it will arm the tracks as you scroll through them. And if you go into preferences and make sure you have arm set to exclusive, it will only arm one track at a time, which means as you scroll to the next instrument, it will automatically unarm the last instrument. The only other way I've done this with the Akai MPK Mini is by mapping track arm buttons to the CC pads. Now, since I'm already using one button to stop the drums and one button for session record, that only leaves me with 6 pads, and this track has a total of 7 instruments that are playable that I would need to arm. So that wasn't really a solution for this session. Usually I don't like to touch the laptop during a session, but using just the arrow keys, not having to navigate with my mouse or anything like that, is virtually the same thing as using a MIDI controller. Now, this is a bit of a deep dive for you to set it up. You have to go into the files of Ableton. So I'm going to leave a link below of a much better explanation of how to change the options.txt file to enable this function, which is a much better explanation than I could ever provide. So anyway, are there any other questions that have to do with this session? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up, or if you think a friend might find it helpful, feel free to share. Also, make sure you subscribe for more live electronic music performances, tutorials, and free sound packs. I'm also interested in hearing of what you guys think of this new setup. I realized that I needed a place to sit down and do these types of videos that are different from me sitting at my desk and actually getting work done. So I've kind of set up this set right here in my bedroom so that at any given point I could sit down and record a video. Let me know what you think of the new set. I'm probably going to add some more lights, make it more interesting for y'all to look at, but it's a start. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.